Welcome back to the Planet Princess podcast. Today I have on Dr. Leah Hollon, and this episode is really about what if everything you have been trying to heal, like the anxiety, the patterns, the heaviness that it's just so hard to move, what if some of that was never even yours to begin with? Leah is a naturopathic physician, educator, and author who has spent nearly 20 years helping women just understand why they are still struggling even after they've done all the work, read all the books, and been to all of the seminars. So her answer is that some of what you've been carrying actually belongs to your mother, and it belongs to your grandmother. And I know some of you may have even experienced this as well. She wrote a book called Unwinding the Imprints of Disease, and it actually took her 8 years to write. And what we're going to be talking about today is how stress and trauma actually gets passed on through your DNA, and it actually gets encoded the moment you're born. So please welcome to the podcast, Dr. Leah Hollon.
Oh, thank you so much. I am so glad to be here.
Yeah. Before we get into the science, I would just like to understand, was there a moment where you were working with a patient, or maybe you had an experience in your own life that made you stop and think that the phenomenon you were seeing, it wasn't just in the mind, it wasn't just like something you can treat with psychotherapy, it was actually that this information was living in the body, and it pointed to the DNA?
Yeah.
Was there a moment where that happened?
Yeah, I would say there were a couple moments, actually. I think, when you're trained as any type of professional, whether it's even, within medicine or something else, like you have a whole criteria of like when you see certain things, but then you start seeing patterns that are like, wait, there's something more here. So of course, I think in the background that was that going on. And I think as a naturopathic doctor, we are trained that, we can see certain things imprint on a family, and they, if you think about some folks, maybe in their body habitus, like they're all really lean, like a beanpole, or they all kind of have that same personality. And so there's this, even going back, hundreds or thousands of years, they talk about like constitutions of people, right?
Yeah.
And I think even in like sacred texts or all kinds of stuff, we'd say that the apple didn't fall far from the tree. So I think like that knowledge was just there. And I think that, again, growing up in different cultures, I think almost every culture on the planet has something about that there's been some substance, some residue that kind of gets passed on. So I think we've probably known that common sense, but I think what the aha moments for me were, I was sitting with a patient one day, and this was when I was out on the West Coast seeing patients, and she was having a really hard time with sleep. And we had done a lot of things. She had been to a lot of providers. And unfortunately, she was on a drug that you're really supposed to only be on for a short period of time. And she had been on for like 10 or 13 years, something very long, and it was not appropriate. Mm-hmm. And so she had come to me and she's like, I just can't sleep. And I wake up and I'm just, very restless. And I was like, okay, well, what about your dreams? And she's like, oh my gosh, they're horrible. They're horrible. I see really bad things at night. And it's really upsetting. And so I had her go into it with me. And of course, if it feels safe, like, of course, making that person feel safe enough to kind of disclose what she was seeing. And it was definitely where she was seeing, in her dreams, she was in a hot sort of desert, and she was seeing injured individuals. And she didn't remember, seeing it on a film or a movie. She didn't have any knowledge of this happening to her. And so I said, well, I want you to, does it feel like your own? It's like one of those aha moments where I'm like, does this feel like your own? And she's like,
yeah,
no. Yeah. And I was like, I just kind of got the full body chills. I think we all have sort of like an inner knowing, right? Like moms really have this inner knowing, and grandmoms and that kind of thing. Grandmothers, they have this inner knowing of like something's not right here, or something's really important here. And I said, I want you to go back to your family, and I want you to share this dream with them if you feel courageous enough, and see what you find out. See if there's any knowledge. And sure enough, it was her father's trauma.
Oh my God.
He had never spoken to her about it because there was so much shame of what he had seen, and he didn't want his own child to experience the level of gravity and hard things that he had seen. And he had been a scout and in the Golan Heights, Night of the Bridges kind of time frame, and he was in charge of being a scout to find landmines. And he was in very kind of like those conditions, and he had seen where people had been severely injured, or in fact, unfortunately killed. And that had stayed with him, but he had never shared that with her. And it was this moment for both of them of like this aha. And when she came back and shared that with me, it was like, wait a minute. Okay, somebody just upped this game, like something else is here. And again, the fact that it didn't have to be a mother, it could be a father. And even with the Veterans Affairs, they have shared on their website that children and grandchildren of our veterans who have experienced significant PTSD of war will experience the same dreams of what their parents and grandparents experienced. So now it's like even the VA knows this when we think about even counseling and helping them walk back from traumas that they've had. So that was a big one. And I would say in my own family, I kind of always felt things a little deeper than some folks. I kind of felt more responsible. I think that on my family line, we had a lot of female-related trauma from my grandmother, and she passed away a number of years ago. But every time my grandfather came home from war, she was pregnant again.
Yeah.
And, at that time, they didn't have the same things that we might have now. And she had significant postpartum depression. And I think that some of the things that we dealt with in our female line was about, is it safe to have another child? Is it safe to have a child on the planet? Because, right? And so sometimes when we see that, we can see infertility or lots of fertility, right? Like where that imprint is kind of passed on. And in that family line, and that we also had, there was extreme poverty. And so, kind of realizing that the trauma of our past was being kind of transferred through the female line of like stranger danger, don't get pregnant, it's dangerous kind of thing. And so I realized that, and I think every woman is different and what feels right for them. And I always felt like I was supposed to have a family, but it not be children. And so I feel really grateful for what the knowledge that our bodies were trying to say, because, hey, it's like trying to protect us, and maybe there isn't enough food, maybe there aren't enough resources, maybe you don't have help. And I do think those traumas can really stay with a person sometimes. So there's more to, like, I have family members who are orphans, grew up in Appalachia, all kinds of things. Even my great-great-great-grandfathers served in the Civil War, one on each side, and one was a prisoner of war. So, there's a lot of imprints that I think I just sort of felt in my life, but I didn't have the science to back it up. I just felt it as an individual.
Yeah. One of my friends, her grandparents actually survived the Holocaust. So she was talking about she was having a really hard time losing weight, and she thought that she just needed to be more disciplined. But you just brought up, like, sometimes when there's a lot of scarcity and things in your lineage, it's like you unconsciously hold on to weight because you're afraid that there's not going to be enough food.
There you go.
And you don't realize how deep the trauma actually goes until like you sit back and you really take the time to examine it. I've had some scenarios even with myself where it was like I saw someone, but like I've never known them, but there was just something about them and their energy that like it gave me chills, like not in a good way. Like you see someone and you think it's someone else, but it's not. But like there's so much like information about like how we interact with each other, like how we like intuitively can feel like, oh, is this other person safe to be like around. or safe to be like friends with.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up about the Holocaust, and that's where most of the research comes from, is from our POWs and from Holocaust families or other types of genocide, where we can really say, yes, that's a true PTSD kind of thing without having to go into all the clinical pieces of things. But that's where we actually saw a lot of it. And you bring up a beautiful point, which is a lot of times, our bodies are made for survival, as a mammalian. Yeah. And so the body will do whatever it has to carry on that lineage. And so from cohorts of folks that were in the Holocaust and their families afterwards, we saw what I would like to call famine genes. So like, for example, like, yeah, does that kind of make sense? So like if a family member was under famine conditions, and we would say that the Holocaust qualifies for that because they weren't oftentimes being fed, or if so, it was very minimal. Yeah. And so the genes can upregulate in certain ways in order to try to protect and pass on to their children or grandchildren. And what we saw was like, even during like Dutch famine studies, we look at World War I, World War II, we saw that they were carrying these like famine genes up to like 2 or 3 generations. And as it's kind of like, it's like, hey, stranger danger, hold on to everything you can, like you were saying. So it's going to be really hard for the body to not want to hold on to that. And then you add food in of our current world that's made with lots of chemicals and preservatives and things that we probably shouldn't have in our food at all. And you add that together. And I think that's why we see a lot of the what we would call like hormonal or endocrine issues that we have for people. But yeah, you bring up a beautiful point about recognizing that like these famine genes are kind of carried on. Now, what we know in human studies is that we can carry this lineage trauma up to 7 generations.
Yeah, 7 generations, like backwards and forwards, and sometimes even like more than that, I've heard.
Yeah, earthworms are 14. But humans, yeah, I think you're exactly right. I do believe it's possible, depending on the intensity of it or sort of the program around the family, that it could be longer. But at least what we've seen in the research is we know it's pretty stable at 7 that we can actually quantify.
Yeah, it's like, you talked a lot about a mother's intuition, and sometimes, I get the feeling that some of the things that we're being intuitive about, like, if we're picking up on energy, and all energy is information, then it's like, how much of that is actually ours, and then how much of that is like true intuition, or is it like information in your lineage and in your genes trying to perpetuate like these famine patterns, or that they say like, oh, like everyone in my family has like high blood pressure, or like right. There's certain families where like cancer and diabetes are prevalent, but we know that it's not necessarily sometimes the actual illness, but a lot of the habits that the family actually has, like lifestyle and I'm gonna say personality as well, because that, we met at a Dr. Joe Dispenza retreat, and he talks a lot about how the personality plays a lot into, like how we can either regulate or down-regulate our genes.
Right, right. Yeah, I think you bring up such a good point about that, is that the environment is signaling the genes. And so like if we're in the same environment, like you talked about diabetes, is that, sometimes what I found for some families that have diabetes is that there's a lack of emotional sweetness in their life.
Wow.
Kind of makes sense in some ways. Right.
Yeah.
And if we think about it, it's like, what is diabetes? It's an issue around knowing what to do with your sweetness, the glucose, your sugar, your blood sugar. Right. And so what I've also seen with diabetes is because it's a slow forming disease, oftentimes, I mean, you will have some people who have type 1 diabetes, right? And they're on insulin as children and that kind of thing. But if we're talking about truly type 2 diabetes, that grandchild is seeing their other family members have diabetes and they're eating the same foods, right? They're thinking some of the same thoughts, or they're used to, their family having amputations. It's almost like there's a normalization that can happen with a lot of diseases, but I see it mostly with diabetes because it is so slow forming that there's sort of this apathy that gets set up, and it's really hard to see diabetes here. Like, like if there's some type of skin cancer, it's a lot easier. If it's not really affecting like your ability to have a bowel movement, that kind of thing. Like there's other things that would bring people, my point is, to the doctor for something like a cancer or something that's really more severe and interfering with their daily life. Diabetes is kind of oftentimes really slow. And I see sort of this apathy that can set up within the family where, oh, well, my grandmother had it. My great grandmother had it. My mother had it. I'm going to have it.
Yeah. It's like people almost expect what kind of illness they're going to have.
Yeah. And I love what you said about that. We know in the research, as you talked about with like Dr. Joe and the researchers that work with him at University of California at San Diego, that we know that our thoughts can upregulate genes, and that's a game changer. I mean, that's we talk about patterns in the field, whether it's if it's truly like nature nurture, if we want to, again, we call it epigenetics now. So, what's signaling the genes, right? But, thinking about even folks that have high blood pressure, or maybe they have to go to the doctor and they don't normally have high blood pressure, but they have to go and have their blood pressure taken. And just by thought alone of having to have the blood pressure taken, they're spiking their blood pressure up just by thought alone. And, for our folks out there, that can probably need another example of like, okay, you might, especially, you might think about someone and maybe it's a romantic relationship and you think about that person and within about 10 seconds, you might have feelings and arousals. Like, so again, our thoughts are so powerful. Both of those examples, you're already signaling lots of different chemicals. You're signaling different, even the blood flow changes, right? We know that. And so I think that people, once they kind of use those two examples, they recognize, oh yeah, like my thoughts do make a difference in signaling the genes. But I love this. I've never been so excited about a study before that I share so much with my own patients about. I pull out the study and I like show them the little graph or the chart. And I was like, this is before and after meditation. Look at those genes that are upregulated just by meditation and thought alone. So whether it's a pattern that's in the field that's a learned behavior, or if it's truly signaling or both, there's something that we can do about it. And I think that's really exciting to think about, regardless of what someone's health or family history has been.
100%, because it's like we get told these things as children. Like my dad has type 2 diabetes, and I remember when I was a kid, on my mom's side, her dad's side, like her aunt, her legs were amputated, and I remember seeing that as a child, and that like, like you're taught not to say anything, like don't ask about, why her legs aren't there, but you get told. It's almost like it gets shown as something that's normal.
Normalized.
As something that could not have been prevented. Mm-hmm. So I think having information that allows you to understand that, it's not just, environment or diet and exercise, but it's truly, if you could just be more aware of how you feel in your body, like that helps you stay in a coherent state of health so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really does. Yeah. It's amazing what we can normalize.
Yeah.
And you even talked about this on one of your previous podcasts about, what some women think that they're going to have a relationship where someone's not faithful, and that's what they're used to, right? Yeah. And I think that we can really, really limit our creations. We can limit ourselves and limit our unhappiness just by what we thought was normal, whether we learned it through society or through our own families or some other combination of that.
Yeah, and it's like, the brain is just inputs and outputs, right? Whatever information goes into the brain, that's the information you create your life with. So I understand why a lot of things get normalized, but now we're seeing, like, especially on social media, that there's just endless possibilities, right? We don't have to pigeonhole ourselves into what our family lineage has been, or what we see just around us in our environment, like where we're from and things like that. We really do have the opportunity now more than ever to actually feel unlimited. And I think that that's such a blessing, because in the past, I don't think that everyone felt that way. Like, it felt very hard to actually believe it.
Yeah. I know what are we really capable of versus what have we accepted as our truth from someone else. Yeah. Even in medicine, we see that all the time. I have patients that are told oftentimes, like, oh yeah, you have stage 4 cancer, you have 3 to 6 months. And I have to be like, stop that. Like, they don't know you, they don't know your background, and we like try to reframe it. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Because then, like, once and Dr. Joe talks about the placebo effect, like, once the brain believes something, now you've activated, the prefrontal cortex, and it wants an outcome. And for some people, they're very obedient to a prognosis. Like, they take it on faith and they don't try to overcome it. And I think, a lot of the times with people who have cancer, my dad has had it twice, I see that even more than, it's easy to blame like your diet and your habits, but it's harder to actually overcome the emotions that lead to the kind of food that you're craving, right? The kind of like how you like to exercise and things like that. It's harder to actually deal with the emotional impact, and again, it's like with this work, it's kind of like the chicken or egg, right? Like, are these really my emotions, or is it like trauma and information and stress in my DNA? Like thoughts that I've absorbed by osmosis, is that actually what's causing these emotional habits?
Right. They're kind of hard to tease out sometimes. And I think, sometimes, when patients come in, they'll tell me about all the things that are kind of going on. And a couple of things that help me kind of to discern, is this theirs or is this someone else's, is oftentimes if they have multiple diseases, if that makes sense. So like maybe they have 2 or 3, that can be very common, right? Like most folks, when they come in, they have 2 or 3 different diseases. But if the diseases are very rare, that's one indicator, or multiple rare diseases, or if they have within their family line, the diseases are all showing up on, like, let's say the neurological system. So like I have one family where dad had a visual disturbance in a certain cranial nerve. So did his daughter, and then the other daughter has like color blindness, and then one has issues around like being able to see things as far as like telescopic vision. And so, you start seeing these patterns that are more rare, right? And they're all falling on the same system of the body. One thing that I will say that how you can kind of know too is in a physiological way or biology is if you have a child that comes in with a missing organ or some type of developmental abnormality of an organ. So that could be a heart, like hole in the heart. That could be a horseshoe kidney, those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. Some of the other ways that we know is if I have mom and a child, is if I see that mom's cortisol, and cortisol is a hormone that our adrenal glands release for in times of danger and times of daytime and stress. And so what happens when, let's say, for instance, we have a parent who's had significant PTSD is initially that cortisol will go really high to try to deal with the stressors that are happening, and then it will flatline. And that flatline affects when it's low. So if anybody's ever taken cortisone before, some type of steroid before, it's trying to mimic cortisol to basically enhance your immune system. So a lot of times we might have people who have like a bad lung infection, like a bronchitis or pneumonia, and you might be put on a steroid pack for a period of time. It's trying to boost that up almost like what cortisol would do. And so when that cortisol goes really low, your immune system is suppressed. It can be suppressed, or you might have a harder time getting over a bad infection. And we saw that during COVID. We actually saw folks that had low cortisol who did not respond favorably to COVID, more likely to die and also worse outcomes. But it also affects the hormonal system. So when cortisol is not where it needs to be, whether it's high or low, we are not going to make the same hormones. We can skip menstrual cycles. We may not be able to regulate our glucose as well if we're kind of in that risk area. But it also affects our neurological system. So all those brain chemicals of or what we call catecholamines, which are basically like these fight and flight kind of chemicals. So that would be like norepinephrine, or if you've heard of adrenaline, it dysregulates that. And so basically with these imbalances of cortisol that someone that might have with PTSD and it's flatlined, those systems are dysregulated. And what we find is if this is happening for mom and this was happening during pregnancy or even before that, let's say if there was a significant trauma, the child will mirror that in them as well, meaning we can see the same cortisol pattern, the same immune proteins different, it'll match up with mom's as well as those brain chemicals. And we can see this even on imaging of the brain, where we can see that parts of mom's brain has been activated and also changed, and also in some places what we call atrophy, or it has shrunk, and we see the same thing in the child. So like those are certain things powerful. It's powerful. It's powerful. And like for some of our POW families, at the end of our chromosomes, which is basically our DNA, is we have these caps, and these caps are called telomeres. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And and telomeres, basically, the longer that they are, we associate that with more of a longevity or kind of vitality. When they're shortened, we see that associated with worse health, worse outcomes, aging process, and death. And so these POWs that were, held in captive, their telomeres shortened. And what we saw was their children's were as well. Yeah. They mirrored that. But as you and I both know, that we can actually, through science, we know that there are ways to lengthen the telomeres. Yeah. Right. And so this is what I love, is even if you feel like you can't never necessarily suss this out. Is this really me? Is this my stuff? Is this someone else? Does it go back further than me? Again, if you see sort of the same system showing up in the family line, you're a little bit more suspicious. If you see certain labs matching up pretty similar, it can also be an indicator. It may not always be 100%, but, I had a family one time who came to see me, and mom had been exposed to Chernobyl, and her baby definitely had imprints of that. She was also a refugee. Her family had actually lived underground, and I talk about this case in the book, had lived underground and outside of like Ukraine and also Russia. And so again, they were under famine conditions, and so it really affects, right, even how the hormonal system is regulated. So One other thing outside of all of that is, I mean, I could go on forever about all the physical stuff, but the emotional stuff is, I would say going back is, if you feel things really deeply and you feel like you're the fixer of the family, or like all the things are kind of on you and you're like, everybody else seems to be fine, but what's going on with me? Like, that's sometimes the proxy. Yeah, you may be the proxy. And, I think that if we think about written word in different traditions, we can see as a sacred text, and I see our DNA as sacred.
Yeah, it definitely is.
And where does science and the sacred separate? I don't think they do.
No.
Right? The two S's.
I think science is just how we quantify things that we know spiritually.
That's right. There you go. And you asked this earlier of like, I always kind of felt that growing up. We just didn't have the science until the Human Genome Project came out. And now the science is proving what we've known all along as humans.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty incredible to think about.
It really is. And going back to that story, like, talked a lot about stress and cortisol. And if we're seeing someone that's coming in with like high blood pressure, that's like, I get the feeling that, based on my own experience, is that a lot of the times what happens is that we're already running at a high cortisol state, right? So by the time you get like this diagnosis of having high blood pressure, or someone points out, like, you're so stressed all the time, it's like it's become so normalized that you don't even notice it, Yeah. And if a child has been like, if your mom was really, really stressed out growing up, you may naturally have and while she was pregnant, right, you may naturally just have like a high level of anxiety and cortisol and just not even know why.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And I think that you bring up a really important point is, when we're talking about where that cortisol is, right, and where it affects the brain chemicals and the hormones and all of that, is that, again, that child may feel that anxiousness, and it might be a tummy ache or a headache, and they don't know why they feel that. And it could be genetic. It truly could be. Or that environment. It's kind of again, that dual faceted, right? And I think that for a lot of people, what we really want to get to is like, what do we do about it, right? And I think,
exactly.
Anything that we can do, I think well, let me back up just a second. I think that a lot of folks, many times, they think, oh, well, this is my lot in life. This is my lot in life. This is how it's been, like, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that, again, we were talking about how people will just accept sort of what that is. But if we can start changing,
COVID, right?
Right, during COVID, right.
Like, some people were like, I remember talking to people and they were just paralyzed by the fear. I'm like, okay, it's my time now, And when it comes to our health, we're just naturally so inclined to just be in a state of apathy. Like, there's nothing you could do about it if you get like a really scary, and I'm not a doctor, right? But I've just seen just like this level of acceptance when it comes to like either when bad things are going on in your life, like finances or like health wise. It's just like people, they totally shut down and they just like accept it. And, they get, I wouldn't say it's just a victim mentality, but they think that that's like the cross that God gave them to carry, and now they have to be like strong about it.
Right. And I think in the work that I've been doing for some time period, and again, not to get too much into philosophy and religion and that kind of thing, but, it brings up the questions of like, why? What's happening here? And I do think there's this, again, that sacredness in science, right? How we can quantify it now is I do think that we kind of come in and be like, okay, I'm going to try this out, right? And like, I think that we have so much to learn here on the planet. And if we see it more as an opportunity and a playground of growth, and, this 3D experience is not easy sometimes. Things...
If
there's gravity, there's the aging process under all the things. And, I think as I've gotten, because of working with patients for so long, I just have such a beautiful, I don't know, just love of really being in the 3D of like, hey, being a human is definitely a humbling experience. But at the same time, there's something very sacred to learn from it. And so if we're talking about like these, again, if there's a sacredness in our DNA, there was a sacredness of us having it in our body, and what can we do, right? Can we change that? Can we, right? So if we think about that stress, I really work with my folks to, as you know very well, it's like to try to get them out of that survival state of those beta brain waves and whatever we need to do to get them into alpha brain waves. So if it happens to be breath work, if it happens to just be visualization or swimming or walking or art or whatever, but it's going to be different for each person, maybe based upon their experience, and just trying to help them through it. So, but they're really the co-creator of their next phase in their life, what chapter they want. I don't know if you remember the old school, like, choose your own adventure stories. Do you remember those? Like, you'll read for a while. It says, okay, now you have an option of going, do you want to go into the forest or do you want to go to the beach? And like, if you wanted to go to the beach, you go to this chapter. And if you wanted to go to the forest, you go to another chapter. And I think we have a lot more choice in our bodies for our healings. We just haven't been told. And I think a lot of this research that's come out now, whether it's nature or nurture, we can change it. The epigenetics has shown with the science that we can change this.
Yeah. And a lot of times just by thought alone, right? And then I always like to say that it's an adjustment period, I know like nurses are sometimes a classic example of someone, they're always on their feet, they're always like running around and things like that. So when you actually have a time to sit down, it's like you can't relax because you feel like you should be doing something. There's just like this adjustment period of allowing yourself to like trust that slowing down and relaxing and putting yourself first is actually okay.
Right, exactly. I'm glad you said that, because I had, just to kind of share something about that, is like I had a patient here last week and he was a new patient. Mm-hmm. And he's been having issues with his blood pressure. Yeah. And he's in his early 60s, and he's retired, but had a big job for decades. I mean, big, huge job, lots of stress, working with management, and his wife was severely injured, where he had to serve as her caregiver for a period of time. So he was always in that like high performance beta brain waves, blah, 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 blah. And like, this is what happens, over time, is the body starts learning that that's the new thing. Okay, so we got to run from the bear. It doesn't see a job differently than running from a bear, that survival technique or a deadline. The body sees it as survival. And so that was definitely, and he recognized it. He's like, yep, I was sort of wondering that myself. And a lot of times people know that. One thing that actually I wanted to go back to, that you were talking about mom and baby, and I wanted to mention, was one of the other ways that we can discern that there's been trauma that has passed down in the lineage is through low birth weight.
Oh, wow.
Low birth weight. Yeah, and it kind of goes back to that cortisol, and that cortisol is a main hormone for our bodies of fight and flight and survival, right? And it can't work in isolation alone. It works with these cool parts of our body called the hypothalamus and the pituitary and the adrenals.
Yeah.
And it's this whole like network that is constantly informing the rest of the body if it's safe. We call it the HPA axis, the hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenal axis. This whole thing regulates, like, if you think you're running from T-Rex or from a bear or from a tiger. But it also recognizes when you're supposed to sleep. But if there's hot or cold or that kind of thing. So it regulates pretty much every system of the body. So our brain chemicals, our hormones, our glucose, our immunity. So all of that. And what happens is that if mom or dad, but mainly mom, feels like she's under stress and in those fight and flight chemicals, what happens is then it's affecting the birth weight. And that is literally what we have seen for children. And so that's one way that we can see that that has been imprinted on the next generation, is through low birth weight. And that is one of the things that they talk about even in maternal health, is that they're very well aware that this is an imprint of what we would call intergenerational trauma. And it could go back further, and of course it's more likely to happen in certain populations who have experienced more trauma in their lineage, even 200, 300 years ago.
Wow. And it may feel like that was a really long time, but it really wasn't, as far as like the information that we're carrying in our genes. Yeah.
And that was one of the reasons that I wrote the book, was that, I live in Richmond, Virginia, and in many ways I've, been around this climate for some time, and recognizing that this imprint is very strong here of these traumas that still live, whether it's a frequency. And I do think that even geography holds an energy, right? And a remembrance, right?
Yeah.
And so in chapter 8, I actually talk about this. So I build up all those chapters, chapter 1 through 7. And by understanding how, like, we know that chemicals like plastics and DES or certain drugs or pesticides can affect our hormones.
Yeah, endocrine disruptors.
Disruptors, yeah, exactly. So just like environmental chemicals, can mimic hormones, we know that behavioral experiences can do the same thing. Like we were talking about signaling genes, you talked about the thoughts, but we have data to support this, even, a number of years back. Anyway, aside from all of that, is that we definitely see that it can really make a difference on the individual related to these chemicals that we are taking in, and whether it's an actual true chemical or a thought or a kind of a predisposition, that can also imprint. So again, we want to try to help people to reset that HPA axis a little bit better so that they can regulate things more appropriately. So then if they are wanting to heal their lineage themselves and their children, or if their children have already been born, that there's ways that we can also teach them to start upregulating those genes.
Yeah, and it's like there's the trauma that gets imprinted in our DNA, right? But then there's also the actual environment that we grow up in. So it's kind of like, there's so many things that are stacked against us as far as nature versus nurture. But then on top of that, like, just things that we are exposed to, like plastics and pollutions and things like that. How can someone really support themselves if they're really trying to reset their HPA axis? Like, what are some of baseline things that are easy to integrate in day-to-day life?
Yeah. I think the most important thing that we can do is try to get in those alpha brainwaves. I really do.
Wow.
It's for those of you out there that might be like, what in the world? But no, alpha brainwaves, I always like to kind of equate it to like alpha for so it's kind of like you feel a little bit more sleepy or tired. You're in a more relaxed state, where you feel like you can really receive. It's almost like what you'd feel like when you're on vacation. And so anything that we can do to help people get in that, and the research that we've seen related to that is there's so many things that can help us get into alpha. And so it's going to depend on the person. And sometimes I work with folks, especially if they're like a high performer and they've been a CEO or that kind of thing, I'm going to have to do something maybe different, or based upon their cultural background, or, even if it's, it's just not known to them, right? So some of the things that include is walking. Anything that's like cross-patterning exercises can be helpful. So just walking, gentle walking, and being in nature. We've done studies to work with what's called heart rate variability. And that's basically, I like to think of it as like the resilience of the heart to accommodate many different things, whether it's a stressor or being able to sit, poolside. So it's
Yeah, and just
that,
enjoy it. Right?
yeah.
And
So,
be present.
yeah. So if you can really help that heart rate variability, and a lot of people are aware of that because they have smartwatches, and that's a way that you can really work. And so you could use breath work, you could use breathing, you could just watch a fish tank, you could go out in nature. But swimming also is another thing because it's kind of cross patterning. So that also can help certain exercises like yoga or Tai Chi. But really, meditation is one of the best things. It really is. And we can see beautiful things happen for people because it gets them into these alpha brain waves. But so does art. You know, for some people, what we're trying to do is almost be in a hypnotic state. Unfortunately, sometimes when we drive, we're like, whoa, how'd we get there? And we're like, what was I doing? You were again, your brainwaves were doing something different. So anytime you can get into that, and even if you just pop into alpha 2 minutes more a day, that's something new. Anytime you can do something new too. So let's say, for instance, part of your stress is related to family or children and that kind of thing is anything that you can do that's new, where you're making new connections in the brain. So art could help. Writing, one of the best studies that I've seen is with working with veterans who couldn't speak the tragic things that happened to them, but they were able to write it. And I would say even with my own trauma that happened a number of years ago, writing was a huge thing for me. I had a writing group that I worked with, and they were just such a beautiful part of my healing, is having community. And what we find is that the research also shows that when we have a community that has an open heart and open ears, right, but is not trying to keep us in a deficient state.
Yeah, or try to tell us how we should be reacting, just letting us go through that process is one of the most supportive environments that
it's like
we're allowed to heal.
Right. It's like allowing them to have a witness for what happened. And like even here in Richmond, we have a VA hospital, and they have a whole floor that is locked down for mental health concerns after they've come back from different things or experienced things. And my writing teacher actually goes in and actually works with them. And then at the end, and it could be a different person each day because depending on how long they've been there, because they're inpatient, and then they actually have a gallery where they share that with other people. And what we found is that when you're able to share it in a community that again has open heart, and they're also about helping you improve and grow versus staying in a state of deficiency. They're about elevating you, right? We see that that healing is so profound. And even for folks that have participated in harming others, we have found that even through dance and art, that it helps to restore them into more alpha brainwaves as well. So, because we talk a lot about folks that have been hurt or injured from trauma, maybe from other people, but we never talk about what we would consider the person. I hate even using the word perpetrator. Like, I don't necessarily like trying to, but let's just say someone who may have made really bad mistakes in their life and hurt other people. There's not a lot of research about that, but there is some related to dance and also art. And of course, there's counseling and that kind of thing. So like things like neurofeedback and biofeedback and cognitive behavioral therapy help to get us into alpha brainwaves. And my all-time favorite is EMDR. And we've done this. Yeah, EMDR is so powerful. So, the research is so good on that, anywhere between 70 to 90% effective, depending on what group of population of people that you're in. Even in our combat war veterans, we're talking 85%, which is so hard to get. Drug therapy is only 20 to 30% for that population. So anything, and that's why a lot of drugs don't work for significant trauma or PTSD, is because they're not really changing the thoughts. Like, you're not really using the behavioral pieces, and you're not really getting yourself into those alpha brain waves. Yeah. You have to consciously work on that, and that's what really restores a lot of the integrity around that sacred DNA. And that's, you said like we do pass on through the DNA. We also, it's through the RNA, and parts of our DNA that we thought was junk. We can actually pass it to, and even the RNA of sperm, which I think again, in places of the RNA that we thought it was just non-coding RNA, we can actually pass that on. So there's so many ways that we have seen that this is happening, and it's not just DNA. Isn't that wild?
That is wild. And it's like, it's funny that we thought it was junk, because we know that in nature, you know, especially if you go back to like Charles Darwin and the survival of the fittest, like the information that gets passed down is only the information that was deemed important enough for our survival. So it's like, what if there is no junk? What if there's something about that specifically that nature thought it was necessary for us to have and to carry with us?
Right.
Yeah,
you brought up Darwin, and I have to tell you a story. He had PTSD.
He did?
Yeah, he lost his mother when he was young, and so
oh my God.
Individuals that have adverse childhood experiences, it is equivalent to PTSD. So that could be losing a parent, that could be having a parent that's incarcerated, that could be living in poverty. It could be all kinds of different things that could happen for a child. But he had probably adverse childhood experiences and also PTSD, kind of complex, we would call that. But his mother died when he was young. And he also, in his quest for knowledge, he was around folks that were doing surgeries on people without, of course, they didn't really have anesthesia then. And that really scarred him. And then he had a daughter by the name of Annie, who he was very close with, and she died, and that definitely just devastated him. And he had what we think was called mitochondrial disease. He was very sick. A lot of people don't know that, but I actually went to his house in England while I was researching this book, and I talk about him in it. And I went to his house, and I wanted to know what he did for treatment. And the only thing that worked for him was hydrotherapy. And so hydrotherapy is another thing that also helps to get the brain waves better into place. You know, people now, it's kind of become more popular. But I wanted to know where his hydrotherapy chamber was in his backyard. And so the curator helped me kind of find it, because I wanted to know his story. I thought it was really important. This man who had given us so much knowledge about biology and the survival of the fittest, I think he truly understood it, because he was living that.
He lived it, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like, even to have a mitochondrial disease, that's like how your cells convert everything into energy. So it's almost like the experiences that he had kind of like sapped him of that like zest, you know?
And he wrote in one of his journals that's there that he said that he was afraid that maybe he had passed that on to his children.
I remember asking my mom about something that happened, and it's like when we don't process the trauma, that's when it actually gets passed down, you know. But when you do work like this, it's like we get to pass down the triumph, right?
There we go.
The lessons, the upregulated genes, instead of the ones that are like, I did the best that I could, basically, you know?
Right. Yeah, I love that. And I think one of the other things that I'll add is gratitude. Gratitude is a big part of, and I'll just share this in my family line. I talk about the gratitude bone, and I think we've all met people who are like, wow, they have this amazing sense of gratitude in the world, and you're just in awe of them, right? And I think as a child, I thought that was something that you were just born with. I didn't realize that that's something that you could build. It's amazing, right?
Yeah.
And growing up in our family, because I think of a lot of things that I shared with you already, the gratitude bone was about the size of a salmon fish rib. You know, the little ribs that look like little toothpicks. And I think I didn't realize that you could build up a bone of gratitude to be the size of a T-Rex hip, you know? And gratitude is another way. Again, it's not about ignoring what happened, but it's true. It's about like, okay, I have to verbalize this or get this out. And the vagus nerve that connects that whole HPA axis is a big part. That's why singing is so helpful. Gregorian chant we see can help. Some people, it's music for them. It moves them. We talk about that. It's a type of literally healing for them. Yeah. Is that anytime that we can then speak it, right, without being in deficiency. We don't want to go back to the old state of deficiency, whether we want to call it a martyr or whatever we want to call that, right?
Yeah.
We don't want to be in that deficiency state, but if we can use the vagus nerve, this is the transformer of our experience. And I even think about Gregorian chant. I think about slave song. I think about lots of those kinds of things that were actually pulling that sorrow, pulling that grief out of the body.
Yeah.
Right. And so we have these innate things that can do that. And gratitude is one of them. And we see that it leads to what we call post-traumatic growth. And post-traumatic growth is basically where you are no longer defined by the old experience. And gratitude is one of those that builds that in. And so what I did is, for myself, that felt meaningful in my family, of going from very little in poverty to abundance, is I got my grandmother's pitcher and bowl. And I write little things each day that I'm grateful for and put it in there. And I would say, especially even with Dr. Joe's work, obviously we know, is that each day I am writing out my thoughts, my actions, my feelings, and how I want to show up that day in my life, and being that true co-creator of gratitude. And I'm so grateful that I realized that I can build in my own gratitude, and I just didn't know it. As a kid, I didn't know. So we're building the bones of a T-Rex for ourselves.
Yeah, I think gratitude and journaling are so powerful because it allows you to just transmute that energy, to transfer it down so that it's not cluttering up your thoughts. But then when you turn around and you have gratitude, it's like you're no longer standing under something trying to understand it, but it's like you feel more, I guess, like you're in the driver's seat of your life once again. And that's so important, because once you feel like you're in control, you're no longer sinking down into apathy, like this is something that you just can't change or recover from.
Right. It's like taking the trash out. We don't want it to keep accumulating, right? And and I think a lot of people think that if they've had significant trauma, or their families had significant trauma, that there must be a whole orchestrated plan, and it has to be perfect, and it has to be all this. And honestly, what I found is it can happen in a moment. It doesn't have to be that. It's literally about just, when we talk about trying to lose weight, or we just have to show up for ourselves sometimes, right? Again, we can't expect ourselves to lose weight overnight. We have to work at it. And just like healing maybe an injury, if you broke your leg, you're not going to put weight on that for a certain amount of time. It's the same thing. You're going to have to actually go to physical therapy. You're going to have to do all those things. And the same thing with healing trauma is you're going to be doing it for a little bit of time, right? But it doesn't have to be this fancy orchestrated thing. You're working on each day. You're building more resilience and more post-traumatic growth.
I love that so much, because it's like, have you ever seen the show Hoarders, where it's just like the house is just cluttered up to the ceiling, and you're just you get paralyzed, just I don't even know where to start, And I think that when it comes to trauma, people feel the same exact way. They're like, do I just throw out the moldy bag of Doritos? Where do I even begin?
That's right. And I think I want people to know, where you begin is being very intentional, of being okay, what is it that I think is the first place for me to start, of what would be helpful today, of getting my brain into more alpha brainwaves. Find the thing that works for you. And I think, and in chapter 9, I have all the different things with the research to back it up, all the things that I've shared today, and find the thing that works for you, and use that intuition that you feel more aligned with. What works for one person isn't going to work for another, and know that there's not a perfect way, but there's an excellent way that exists for you, and you can rebuild it each day. It doesn't have to look the same each day.
Yeah, that's beautiful, because it's just follow your bliss, and the healing does come.
Yeah. Creating anything new is where it kind of happens. You step outside yourself, right? You learn a new language, you put on a new outfit you've never done, you learn how to cross stitch, or you go bowling and you've never done anything that you can do that's new, because it starts helping those new kind of connections in the brain. And spend more time in alpha. Just be intentional.
Yeah, I love that. because that feels doable, you know?
Right?
Like you said, it doesn't have to be this big orchestrated plan, but it could just truly be something each day where it's like, even if it was just for 5 minutes, you know, you showed up for yourself in some way, some shape, some form.
Yeah. I remember one meditation that I had at a retreat, and I was healing this female line of my family.
Yeah.
And in the meditation, this beautiful elephant showed up. The face of the elephant showed up. And I got done, and my sister, I wanted to call her about it because I was so clear that it had to do with this female reproduction in our family and this female line.
Yeah.
And my sister was so excited. She's like, I have to tell you something first. I had a dream, Leah. She's like, that I was on an elephant. I hadn't even told her yet. She's like, I was on an elephant and you were on an elephant. So my elephant came over to your elephant. And then our elephants kept traveling forward to our female ancestors who we didn't even know. And we went up to their elephants and helped us get down off the elephants. Those are the things that you're like,
you can't pick that stuff up. It's just like, wow.
Right. And it was so clear that both of us at that time, she was asleep having the dream while I was in the meditation. And so, again, beautiful things like that where, you know, you may have a proxy for the family, but maybe you've got two proxies in the family clearing the line. And once one person's doing the work, we find that it's a lot easier to heal that lineage for the whole family.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny, like, how just the small things, it has the butterfly effect, right? Like these small changes that we make actually are not small. They make a huge difference.
Yeah, it's beautiful. We're so much more connected than we think.
Yeah, and I think that in this day and age, a lot of people feel lonely, you know, and like they're living in some type of isolation, but just knowing that we are connected, you know, there's 8 billion people on this planet. There's no way that you could ever truly be alone. That's beautiful as well.
Yeah, totally is.
If anyone wants to connect with you more, where can they find you and get a copy of your book?
Yeah. So I'm on Instagram as Leah Hollon, and I'm also on Facebook as Dr. Leah Hollon. And I also have a LinkedIn account, so you can find me there too. And then for the book, it's called Unwinding the Imprints of Disease. You can get it directly from my website if you'd like, which is drleahhollon.com. Or you can get it through Balboa Publishing or even Amazon, and Barnes and Nobles is pretty much anywhere you want to get it. And I also have, I did the recording myself. And so that's also available as an audiobook and also an ebook.
Okay, that's incredible. Thank you so much for sharing. This conversation was truly insightful. I learned so much, and I'm just like fascinated about how everything really is connected, not just in our family lineage, but we're one planet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's true. That human experience.
Yeah, like you said, it's sacred, and it's there's just something about it. There's ups and downs, but there's something magical about being here and being alive, that we get to share this experience with others.
Yeah. So true. So true. And I'm so grateful for you having me on. It feels very magic. I feel like when we met, it was very magical. So thank you so much.
Yeah, like I think we actually met by accident, right?
Synchronicity.
Yeah, that was a synchronicity, 100%.
Oh, so beautiful. Well, thank you so much for all the beautiful work that you're doing in the world and inspiring so many people out there.
Hi, everyone. Before we wrap up, I just wanted to give this quick medical disclaimer. The information shared in this podcast is intended for educational and informational purposes only and is not medical advice. The content discussed by the host and guests is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease and should not be used as a substitute for individualized medical advice from a qualified healthcare professional. Listeners are encouraged to consult with their physician or other qualified healthcare providers regarding their individual health concerns. I will definitely link Leah's contact information below in case you would like to get in touch with her personally. However, if you are experiencing a medical emergency, please call 911 or seek immediate medical attention. Sending you so much love, sending you so much light. I love you so much. Toots.